Hi, everybody. This is Patti Negri. Welcome to the Witching Hour. Yes, the Witching Hour. That hour of the day when the veil is thin and magic happens. Usually it's late at night, but now it's whenever you happen to be tuning into this podcast. Yes, podcast. My guest today, my magic today, is a witch, a priestess, an author, Lisa McSherry. Let me tell you a little bit about Lisa. She is contributed to many magazines, anthologies, and annuals such as Witches and Pagans, New Witch, and Llewellyn's Almanacs. She has led JaguarMoon Coven since 2000. First time I've heard that term. She's been featured on many pagan podcasts and is the founder of Facing North, an online community resource. For more, you can see her at lisamcsherry.com, and we will get more to that. And she has this beautiful new book. I'm not even sure if it's out or it's coming out. I'm very lucky. A Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
I am so thrilled to have you. I just got your book. Again, even the practice copy, the not yet published copy, and it's beautiful. So you're all the way in Portugal, correct? So yay! We'll talk really loud. So tell us a little bit about your book. I love the fact that you create a magical path that works for you, where it's not like candy coated. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I created it because I've actually been teaching newcomers to witchcraft basically for the last 20 plus years. And over and over and over again, what I heard from them was that they're just overwhelmed by the possibility of so much information and getting it wrong, lots of worrying about getting it wrong. And they were just looking for something structured. You know, you can figure almost anything out online if you find the right website or 20 websites, I guess. But they just really wanted structure. And so I actually have taken the last 20 years of my training and, well, put part of it, I should say, into this book. This is just the basics, what I sort of think of as like the core practices that you need to have kind of down as you create your own spirituality. And while my background is witchcraft, it doesn't have to look like witchcraft in the end.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, because I'm looking at it now. You start out with foundation, which is really good. You talk about your book of shadows and your altar and deity. It does look like you've really lined it up very nicely. It's like, okay, oh yeah, oh, there's deity within that. What is magic? So what is the first thing? I mean, I'm telling everybody, what is the first thing that you suggest someone do? Okay, I'm new to this, or maybe I've done it for a while, but I don't really know what I'm doing. What do you suggest people like kind of get started with?
Start writing it down. It's the absolute foundation. I mean, there are different ways to think about it, but I actually think that if you don't start writing down what you're doing, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're noticing, you won't notice the changes. And the changes start coming pretty quick if you're paying attention. And it's also a really great way to figure out the stuff that doesn't work for you. Because you can do things for a while and then be like, hey, no, I've been trying this moving meditation, for example, for a month, and I'm not feeling very meditative or calm. Why am I still doing it? Well, if you know that you've been doing it for a month and you've been tracking that, you know, in your book, then you have a better sense of, no, this isn't for me. Let me move on to something else. And it's also useful when you look back 6 months later, a year later. When I was younger, I used to have a mind that remembered everything. That's pretty unusual. And in a world full of as many distractions as we have, if you don't write it down, you lose it really, really quickly.
Yeah, that is true. If it's not like on my Google Calendar or written down, it's not in my brain at all anymore. And that was even when I was young. But also what sounds good and I didn't, when I started this decades and decades ago, you know, I just kind of threw in like we do, but I didn't write it down. So what I would love to have something like that, my process. Plus, in my experience, the process of choosing this path, choosing a witchy path, it is about awareness. It is about consciousness of what we're doing, not just going through the life with zombies doing what people tell us to. So you're starting people off on that path.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's literally, I think, the most important thing, because one of the questions I ask people to write in their journal or their book is, why are you doing this? Why are you interested? What's calling you to something unorthodox, outside the normal, the liminal? Why do you want to play there? Because that motivation will change.
Ah, another good question. Another good question. So that's is that your chapter, what you're calling Book of Shadows?
Yeah, basically,
Yeah, I
that's
like that.
what I'm talking about in there. There's a little bit of how to organize it, or how to think about organizing it, with some thoughts about, are you living in a house with other people? So is this something you have to keep private, and or is it going to be something that maybe someone else might see? How do you feel about that? Thinking about whether you may ever show it to somebody else, which is a little strange, but sometimes we do. We want to share information with somebody, so we just say, here's the page, go write it down, or never. And of course, there's different ways to think about it, because if you're writing for an audience, you're writing very differently than if you're just writing for yourself.
Right. Right. Oh, that's
So
fabulous.
yeah, and there's also a little bit in there about how to actually make your own ink.
Oh,
If you want to get a little crafty, literally crafty with it, it's kind of fun to, even if you have a store-bought, sketch journal or something like that, making your own ink, which is fairly simple,
really?
can actually add a little fun to your situation. And then you can infuse it with your intent or a scent, things like that later on.
Well, I'm going to read that first, because I wouldn't even have the beginning idea of how to make my own ink. You go to Office Depot? No, it's
Yeah, exactly. Oh
that.
yeah, I'm a gel pen person myself, so.
I like gels too. And so then you send people towards creating an altar, right? Now, is that where you give them thought, like, what is your belief system? Is that starting to create or do you set them up elementally, or?
Actually, I just set them up much more basically than that. I just want them to create a place that they begin to consider sacred.
Mm.
And the idea is to show up every day, is to go into sacred space every day. And what you define as sacred, and what I define as sacred, and what is, Joe down the street defines as sacred, can be very, very different things, even if we all use the same term of altar. And so there's a process in there about defining sacred for yourself, which is a step towards defining your beliefs, but it's like 0 point as opposed to step one. Because a lot of what this book is I want to encourage the reader to think about what they want to be creating, and in this practice that they're creating, because it isn't cookie cutter. It shouldn't be cookie cutter. It's personal. And I actually find that is one of the best things about witchcraft in general. But it doesn't, again, as I keep saying, it doesn't have to be witchcraft. It's just, that's where my playing happens the most.
Yeah, it's whatever. It's a template. That's what I always say. It's that you could use a different template, different wording system, but it's the system. So, okay, those are both really great things. Again, we're journaling, we're writing things down, we're creating sacred space that we go to, which starts a lot. I'm just going through this because I just got your book, so it's great. So then you talk about deity. So are you kind of introducing just different witch gods and goddesses into that?
Actually, I stepped even a little bit further off than that. I really tried hard to not get into too many names. I wanted people to think about what their relationship is with deity, because quite frankly, most of us came from a different religious origin. I like to say I'm a recovering Catholic. They never let you go, so okay. But those practices are like imprinted on you. So it's more a step back. What do you think about deities? Is deity a god, always a god? Does it have to be a god? I also take the opportunity to talk about the fact that deity doesn't have to have a gender. It doesn't have to be male or female. It doesn't have to be interested in the opposite sex as its, primary love partner. And to think about deity as something maybe larger than all of those labels, while still using labels, because labels are how we approach the energy, which is a later chapter. But sort of step back for a second. If your relationship with deity is based on the fact that you're very attracted to storm deities, for example, I am literally making this up, then you're probably going to go to mythology and be reading stories about those deities. And that might lead you down a certain kind of path of magic or thinking about magic because that's how you're thinking about your deity. But it's also really important to remember that you can do magic without deity. You just need to be thinking about whether you are or aren't. So it's all kind of wound up in that.
Okay. Well, I'm getting the whole concept of this already, which shows me why it is really different than any other beginner setup book than anybody else's. This is really good because usually, and these are our gods, and this is what you do, and this is here. So you're making people think. Oh.
I'm trying, and I'm also trying to step away from sort of the fairly typical, God and goddess, duality, or the triple goddess and the dual god, or various things. I mean, my own coven actually practices with 5 different faces of deity, 3 pairs of gendered, male, female, for that basically follow the maiden, youth, mother, lover, and crone sage model. But then we have 2 other faces that we work with, one of which is the warrior, and the other is the dark deity, which is genderless and has different lessons to offer. And so my own personal model incorporates a whole lot of different aspects and names and energies.
That's good. I must say mine too, and it took me a long time to realize that. It's like I'm working, because again, I am so elemental in my approach with this tree spirit and this spirit. It's like, did I forget gods and goddesses? No, we're all gods and goddesses. We got it. It's like, I think there's a little trend that way. So that's okay. It's good. We create. So here's a good and this is a chapter of yours. What is magic? One of my favorite questions anyway.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty traditional. I think magic is the ability to reshape reality in conformance with your will. So, thank you. I think Aleister Crowley for saying it the first time. So we just keep repeating it. But bound up in that is this idea of control. And I think this is the place where the ability to do magic is so powerful, because it's how we reshape, literally our reality, but we do that by changing ourselves.
Yeah. And
getting in alignment with the energy around us, of the natural world. And so we can just give it that little push. It's a little bit of Aikido. It's just a little nudge, and then things flow a little bit smoother. Things flow a little smoother, we can get a little bit more done. Doop, 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 and so on and so forth. So, magic is fun, right?
Magic is fun. Can't imagine a world
without. It's playtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Which leads us also, again, I'm just following your book, into ethics. So you do deal with the ethical side of what we do. Yeah.
And that was actually the hardest part for me, because I almost wanted to start the book from the perspective of ethics, because I think it's so fundamental, particularly in a world where moral ambiguity is much more common, I think, than it used to be.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most important things that an aware person can bring into their life, is to actively think about the consequences of their actions taken, actions not taken, and how it affects everything. And it's the hardest part about being a witch, I think, on every level. It's the hardest part about being a responsible person in the world. If the world around you may not be acting very ethically, we still have to.
We have to.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Hail Marys won't help.
Nope, absolutely not. No. Apologizing doesn't help unless you also make reparation.
Yeah,
It's yeah.
That's even the science, because I fall through it. It's like cause and effect, action and reaction. We can go science terms, we can go whatever. So that is good. And then that's your foundation section into the book, and then you get into the practice. So whether we go through chapter or chapters, I know you do start talking about your mind. It's in our heads, and so
yeah. And so it's now we get into the doing part. Having sort of set things up. And I actually really feel like readers could just go through the first section and stop, having sort of figured out how they want to work in the world, and they don't actually want to do things with their practice. I mean, I think that's perfectly valid. Just having something you believe in that kind of gets you through. But the practice part is okay, so now you want to get into stuff. Now you want to do that magic that we were thinking about, and, make your ethics work kind of a little bit. So I start talking about, okay, these are various ways you can do things. What's the difference between a spell and a ritual? And here's some crafty ideas for, literally with a big C, craft, for worshiping or working in the world and, making magic happen.
Oh, that's beautiful. And you go into energy itself, energy work, since that's everything we do.
Kind of the point, yeah.
And tools, and again, creating the sacred space. That's going back and around. And you have little, again, I'm just opening this up, and every time I see it, it's like, oh, and you'll go into history of something, and you'll go into modern usage of something. So again, very, very different. So did you just go on?
Go ahead.
No, go.
No, you were starting to ask a question, please.
I can't remember what it was. I'm good at this. No. Oh no, there's your ink. Lamp black. Eggs. Egg yolk. Egg yolk is in ink. I learn something every day.
I know, it's fascinating.
It is fascinating.
Yeah, I have to say, yep. So going back to, there's little bits of research in there partly because there's so much misinformation out there. I mean, for example, in the ethics section, the Annat Harm Nun, classically known as the Wiccan Rede, that was said by Gardner, the guy who founded Wicca, but he wasn't talking about that as an ethical precept for life. He was talking very specifically about doing magic, which shifts the entire conversation as far as I'm concerned, because of course my magic should not harm. I mean, I gotta figure that out. Or I'm actually one of the very few people who's okay with hexing. You just got to be real clear about why you're doing it and what might come as a result. So, okay. So I don't actually generally recommend it for beginners, because you really kind of have to be very in tune with yourself and knowing what you're doing, or it backfires in a lot of unusual ways. She said, thinking back to when I got started. Oh yeah. But so if we're supposed to be doing this harm none when we just do magic, then what are we carrying forward into the world, and where did this come from? And I think it's really interesting to know that it came in the 70s when witchcraft kind of came to America in a big way and started getting more popular, and people were very afraid of witches and witchcraft. So kind of the community said, we're just going to say harm none is our basic spiritual precept, and you can trust us because it's like our 10 commandments. Like, we're not going to hurt anyone, don't worry. And it's like, it's a little more complicated than that, though, because now it's gotten boiled down, and like the 10 commandments, just spouted as opposed to followed. So have a little history and understanding where that came from.
That's beautiful. So what are some of the biggest either pitfalls people fall into, or biggest mistakes somebody, especially starting out on their practice or creating their practice? What are some things that people again, pitfalls or things that they worry that they
Mhm.
shouldn't?
I think the hardest thing is what I call imposter syndrome, which is that it's sort of the witch version of it, which is that you feel like you're not doing it right.
Ah,
And so you doubt, like you see the doubt right in from the beginning. And that's really hard to get over. I mean, like it's still a tricky one for me 40 odd years later or something like that of doing it, because, like, do I actually own this power? Do I really have the decision making ability here? Is this okay for me to do? And for a newcomer, those questions feel huge, because it's like, oh, if I do this, I could hurt someone and I won't know it. I can't, how can I trust? And it's like, look, you gotta trust. You gotta trust deity, you gotta trust your divination tools, you gotta trust that it's okay to do. You have to trust that you're gonna make mistakes and it's okay. There's a hard one. That's a really tough one. Like, failures are fantastic learning experiences. I mean, and truly, when you're just starting out, I don't think it's not like anyone's going to wreck the world. Okay. That just doesn't happen when you're just starting out. But there might be some bad things that are not bad. I shouldn't say that. Unintended consequences. It's a much better way to put it. So, yeah. So I think those are kind of, and the pitfalls are really not thinking it through. Borrowing a spell from a book that you read and saying, oh yeah, I want to charm birds, so I'm going to do this spell, and all of the correspondences are weird or don't relate to you or have no meaning, so it's just words. So, yeah.
I love that, and this is true. So, yeah. Oh, you go into seasons. Now, do you go into Wheel of the Year in itself, or just seasons, or do you talk people through?
Honestly,
Huh?
I can't remember what I write about with the.
Oh, that's okay. I
sorry.
see Autumn Embers and Blue Moon Gazer and altar description, seasonal altars.
That is, yep. That is going back to seasonal altars. What do I write about the?
I'm going to have to send you a copy of your book that you don't have.
I'm going to open up my draft on the computer and look at what I wrote there. That's so funny. I went completely blank.
That's okay.
Okay. Sorry.
We could cut it out or we could leave it in.
This is the part we're going to edit out.
We're witches. We're witches. We can.
Yeah. So as a favor, yes, please edit that part out, because I just went completely blank on what that is. Huh. And I'm not going to open up anything else.
Okay. Okay. So that is good. All right. So I know you get, I just, because I opened up this page, I'm doing a little bibliomancy. You do get into gender, biology, and inclusivity. So I see that you're getting modern with things within this world that we must be.
I really think it's impossible to work in a liminal space without acknowledging that those conversations have to happen, and that our old notions, quite honestly, of gender duality and that sort of constant duality of right, wrong, black, white, is just not really doing us any favors anymore. We're fine maybe as a beginner's model, but it's kind of time to move past that. And I actually think a lot of even really traditional covens, Gardnerian covens, which are classically, supposed to never be that duality, they're having those conversations. They're doing that work, and they are working in different modalities because they realize that it's irrelevant on so many levels. It's a person's energy that is important, not their gender,
right?
Or who they sleep with,
yeah,
sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, because It is true. This next generations under ours are different. They are so much more fluid. I've always thought I was pretty fluid, but they're really fluid. Within it, it's like,
hmm
wow, it's so refreshing. It's so refreshing.
I
Um,
have to honestly thank my coven for uh, helping me do this work because they are very fluid. They are doing this work themselves. And, we got to work together and they've brought me along and I've loved it. I really, really have. It's been this last couple of years in particular, we have really actively been doing a lot of work around gender roles and who's doing what in the group and shedding a lot of terminology that I'd kept for 20 plus years because that's what I learned. And it was time to just let it go. And that was a fascinating process in many, many ways.
oh, so speaking of your coven, and I know you have a cyber coven, is your coven cyber? Or do you guys meet for real? Are you all over the?
We are all over. Well, right now I'm in Portugal. There's another member here in Portugal. And then we have a variety of members across Canada and out throughout the United States. In the past, we've had people in Japan and Germany, France, Martinique. I think that pretty much covers the ones. Spain has been in there. And so I've been very used to working with people across time zones. And yes, it's always been virtual all these years. We will meet sometimes in physical space, but that's more, we're traveling, we have to be in the same place. We connect with one another and seeing each other there. But I think coming out of the last 2 years of isolation and lockdown, a lot of people have learned that you can, in fact, actually make connections that are serious and real over the internet, in virtual space. And it's kind of funny for me because that's literally what I've been doing the last 20 years. And a lot of people who used to say, oh, it's impossible to do magic online. It's like, now they're kind of saying, hey, that virtual ritual we did was pretty good. It's like, yeah, you still raise energy, you still do the work, you still heal.
Yeah, you were just ahead of your time by 20 years. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Because that's what I've discovered too, just in the last 2 years. And both clients and working, and even like my seances came online, and they're just the same. It's like, how does this work? I started a school. I have a school, and it's all over, which I really want you to teach at. We'll talk later.
We'll talk later.
Yeah, and it's. I think that's part of technology drives me crazy. I don't make me plug in anything to anything, but this magic, you in Portugal, me in Los Angeles, our listeners and watchers everywhere is magic in itself. And how energy does flow.
Exactly. Energy flows and it's not perfect. It's not, you get in a room with 10 people holding hands and raising energy that way. It is very different from getting 10 people online raising energy, but it's there and it's still directed, it still works, and it still transforms, which is kind of the key, I think, bottom line. I would have stopped doing this years ago. I'm too practical.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
So
it's too hard.
Yeah, it is too hard. This is fascinating. So speaking of that, I know this is your new book coming out with Llewellyn, A Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice, but don't you have a book that deals with the online world of?
We do, actually. Thank you for asking about it. Way back in 2002, I wrote a book called The Virtual Pagan. Back in 2021, I rewrote it, heavily revised it, and brought it into the modern world. The original book talked about how exciting it was that we were having a 486 processor coming in our computers. So very, very out of date. And the new one talks as much about security and being safe online and keeping your privacy as it does about magic, because it has shifted what we're doing and the tools we have available to us now to talk to one another, to communicate, to connect, literally to connect, are so much more rich than they have been. And so, yes, Virtual Pagan 2.0, available Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can get it print on demand. And I'm actually very proud of that book. I will say it is. I'll have to revise it again in 10 years, I'm sure.
I'm going to get that one too.
Oh, good.
So this is, again, fascinating. For so many of my people are new to the craft. And even if you're not new to the craft, I'm old to the craft, and I'm excited about reading this. So tell people when they can get this, where they can get this, where they can find you before we go.
Thank you. So it releases officially on October 8th. So coming right up, and it's available for pre-order now through all the usual channels. I highly recommend you go to independent bookstores and order through them. And I'll just as a little plug here, for orders, pre-ordering sales of books makes a huge difference in how the larger sellers handle book sales. Their algorithms go crazy when a pre-sale kind of takes off. So that's a really wonderful way to support an author, actually, in many, many ways. And so it releases on October 8th. I can always be found at the very easy to remember lisamcsherry.com. I've got a blog there that I write every couple of weeks, little bits of things that sometimes are magically related or interesting in the world. You can always find out where I'm speaking, events. I am actually speaking at a couple of conferences coming up later this year, so you can find out more there. And I love talking to people and interacting with people. So it's a great place to just even ask me a question and check in on something. So
that is fabulous. So you guys check her out, Lisa McSherry, get her books. What about social media? Are you on social media?
I am on social media, Lisa McSherry author. You can always find me on Facebook, and there's a really strange one on Instagram. It's McSherry Lisa or something like that, but you'll recognize my face for all of those things. And that's a great way to follow me. I am not on the TikTok or other things. I have vague plans to do something on YouTube going up in the future, but you would find out that about me on my website.
Right. All I can say is you would be great on TikTok because they get it wrong a lot.
That's what I'm told, and that might be why I don't go there.
oh. Yeah. So anyway, thank you. I am so excited to get to read this, to meet you. I do want to talk later. So thank you, Lisa McSherry. You guys check out this book, A Witch's Guide to Crafting Your Practice. Create a magical path that works for you. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.